My husband asked me to give him $50,000 for his parents' trip. When I refused, he left me helpless on a winter night road, saying, "Now walk on this road with your broken leg. Money won't save you from the bears." But luckily, a truck driver rescued me. The next day, when he arrived at our company office, a shocking surprise awaited him. "My name is Hannah. Life sure has a funny way of showing you who's in charge. Not too long ago, I was married to Harold. You'd see me walking down the hall with that just married glow. I really thought quitting my job at Siren for a marriage was the right move. Love is more important than money, right?" Siren was a strange place. They had more rules than a prison. One big rule was about relationships. When Harold and I got married, we broke that rule. Our boss, Randy, called us into his office and gave us a choice. One of us had to leave. He said it like it was some kind of game show, but he wasn't joking. That night, Harold and I argued like we were in a reality TV show. Looking back, I was pretty foolish. I gave in first and quit my job the next day. I left my growing tech career to be a good wife. If only I knew then what I know now. But isn't that how life works? Now, here I am, sweeping up cereal because Mr. Big Promotion can't seem to hit the bowl. "Roy, did your mother never teach you to aim?" I called out. My voice disappeared into the walls. "What?" He shot back, sounding annoyed, like I had insulted him. "Never mind," I muttered. "Not worth the fight. We used to joke around. Now, every conversation feels like walking through a minefield." 3 hours later, he was on the couch, glued to the TV. I looked at him, then at us or whatever was left of us. "Are we going to talk, or are you planning to marry the couch?" I asked. Harold didn't even turn his head. "Talk about what?" I took a deep breath and counted to 10 in my head. "I don't know," he said with a shrug. "What about us? Where is this mess even going?" We stood there in silence while the TV kept talking to itself. Then it hit me. I'd been living in a glass house and someone else threw a rock. Everything we built was going up in flames, and neither of us knew how to stop it. Funny, isn't it? One day, you're making plans forever. The next, you can't even talk about the weather without starting a war. I looked at Harold, sitting on the couch. He was my husband, yet he felt as distant as a stranger on a bus. The change from being distant to being cruel was slow, but I felt it. It was in the way the summer air had cooled, the way the wind carried a sharp edge. Everything between us had shifted, like the seasons. I stood in the kitchen, thinking about how things used to be easy. Now, every step felt like walking on ice, never knowing if I'd stand or fall. I knew exactly how Harold liked a steak, rare but not too bloody, seasoned just right. I had mastered it over the years, but that night, the oven betrayed me. Or maybe I betrayed it. Harold walked in from the living room, his heavy footsteps warning me of his mood before I even saw his face. Then he stood in the doorway, looking at the food like he wanted to tear it apart with his hands instead of eating it like a normal person. "What's this?" he asked, pointing at the plate. "Your job too hard for you now." His voice was rough, like gravel scraping against the pavement. I treaded carefully. "It's just a little cooler than usual, Harold. The steak, I mean." "It's not." "Not what?" He cut me off, his glare sharp. I bit my lip, holding back the words in my head. Saying them out loud would only make things worse. "Look, Hannah," he said, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "When I say I want my steak hot, I mean I want to feel the animal's soul leaving its body. When I cut into the steak, it made a sound, dull, like a judge's gavel." Harold tapped it with the back of his fork. "This is dead." Twice over. He didn't yell, but his voice was sharp enough to make my skin crawl. It was cold, distant. Like he didn't care, yet somehow full of bitterness meant just for me. No shouting, no drama for anyone else to see. Just words, sharp like knives. I stayed quiet, knowing anything I said would only make things worse. He pushed the plate away, then looked at me. His eyes were dark, filled with something I couldn't name. Son of a He stopped himself, shook his head. "You know what? Forget it." He turned his back on me, on the food. "I'm not eating this crap." He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, his movements stiff, jerky. "Fix your mistakes, Hannah. Or next time, it won't just be dinner in the trash." The door slammed behind him, as if closing off the last bit of happiness we had left. I stood there, staring at the door, listening as his footsteps faded down the hall. I let out the breath I had been holding. The steak just sat there, cold and lifeless, like I felt inside. The trash can was waiting, ready to take in another failed effort. Throwing it away felt like tossing out a piece of myself. But behind closed doors, the truth was different. The more Harold demanded, the smaller I became. He inspected everything. The house, the food, the way I moved. I had no job, no money, just him and his approval. And that was slipping away more and more each day. On nights when his parents caught even the slightest crack in our perfect act, I paid the price, left to sleep on the couch as punishment for not playing the loving wife well enough. Tonight was no different. The table was set for two, plus his silent, ever-judging gaze. "What's this?" Harold asked, his voice flat. "Steamed broccoli," I said, keeping my voice steady. "For dinner? Broccoli again?" He scoffed, pushing the plate away. "Don't you know how to cook anything else?" I swallowed the sharp reply on my tongue. "It wouldn't help. I'll make something else if you don't like it." "That'd be a first," he muttered. The words stung like tiny cuts that wouldn't stop bleeding. I bit my tongue, letting the anger simmer inside me. Quiet but growing. I turned back to the kitchen, feeling his eyes on me. "Where are you going?" he snapped. "I said I'd make you something else, didn't I?" My voice had a bit of defiance I didn't even know was left in me. Harold stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Sit down," he said. "Let's not act like you have anything else to do. Your whole world revolves around me, remember?" His words pulled me back like a leash. "Yeah," I muttered. "I remember." I heard him sit back down. No apology. No thank you. Just silence, heavy like dust settling in the air. As the night dragged on, so did his complaints. "This house is a mess," he said out of nowhere. I followed his gaze. The books on the coffee table weren't perfectly lined up. A pillow was slightly out of place. The house looked lived in but not the way he wanted. "Clean it up." I wanted to scream, to tell him that a real home will never be as perfect as he wanted. But instead, I fixed the pillow, straightened the books, and swallowed the lump in my throat. "The place could use some work," I mumbled under my breath. "What was that?" His voice had that sharp edge. "Nothing," I answered quickly. Louder this time. "Just talking to myself." He gave me a suspicious look but didn't say anything else. That night, I lay in bed staring at the darkness between us, filled with unspoken thoughts and dreams I had buried long ago. I thought of all the things I wanted to say. The hurt, the anger, the life I once imagined but felt slipping away. I was trapped, bound by invisible chains of fear and dependence. Perfect, they all called us. But perfect was just a word, and words were cheap in the lie that was our marriage. Then one day, just a regular afternoon, I was heading back from the store, my arms full of groceries. Never once did I think a little patch of ice on the sidewalk would take me down. But life has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? I slipped hard. The pain shot through my leg like nothing I'd ever felt before. I tried to get up, but my leg refused to move, throbbing like crazy. That's when a couple of strangers rushed over. "You okay?" one of them asked. They must have seen the whole embarrassing fall. Trying to play it cool, I just nodded. "I think I broke my leg." The people who saw me fall didn't even hesitate. They waved down a cab and got me to the hospital. The emergency room was a mess. Nurses took their time, and when a doctor finally showed up, he only needed one look at my leg before his face said it all. "It's broken," he said, like he was talking about the weather. I didn't gasp because of the news. I gasped because I knew I had to face Harold with this. While waiting for the doctors to do their thing, I figured I should let my husband know. I called. No answer. Sent a text. "Broke my leg. At the hospital." Short and to the point. Not even a reply. Turns out I had to stay overnight, and let me tell you, hospitals are no 7-star hotel. Cold coffee, a nurse who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, and a stiff bed that made everything hurt more. By morning, as soon as I could hobble, they shoved some papers in my hands, had me sign, and set me off in a cab. The cast on my leg was white as snow and twice as annoying. When I got home, Harold was waiting, his face like a storm about to hit. "Know how are you? Know what happened?" The first thing out of his mouth. "Where's dinners?" Seriously? I was standing there, on crutches, my leg in a cast, and all he cared about was dinner? I snapped. "What do you think I was doing? Dancing? Look at my leg." But he wasn't done. He rolled his eyes, acting like I broke my leg just to inconvenience him. "You always have excuses," he scoffed. "Can't even do the one thing you're supposed to. Can you believe that?" After a whole night alone in the hospital, in pain, exhausted, all he cared about was his stupid dinner. It was too much. I stood there, hurt, shaking, and suddenly, everything felt different, like that patch of ice I slipped on had cracked wide open beneath us. Still, I dragged myself to the kitchen table, step by step, crutch by crutch, because of course I had to make dinner for my beloved husband. And that's when he noticed. The trash bin. It was nearly full, just slightly overflowing. A tiny thing. But with Harold, nothing was ever tiny. "What's this now?" he snapped, glaring at the bin. "You're home all day, and you can't even do the simplest tasks." Then, like a child throwing a tantrum, he stormed over, grabbed the bin, and knocked it over. Trash spilled everywhere, a mess at my feet. "Clean it up," he ordered. My fingers shook. I reached down, but not because of the pain in my leg. This hurt was deeper, a crack in something that had once been whole. That night, I didn't sleep. His words echoed in my head, mixing with the hot sting of tears. Morning came, but it didn't bring any comfort. Just light, showing the mess from the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, papers in front of me, the sound of coffee dripping in the background. Harold stumbled in, still reeking of beer from the night before. "Morning," he grumbled, his voice rough. "What's for breakfast?" I pushed the papers toward him. "I've got your breakfast right here." He squinted down at them, confused for a second. Then he looked up, a slow, mocking smile spreading across his face. "You serious?" "As a heart attack," I said, though inside, my heart was racing. He threw his head back and laughed, loud and bitter. "You ain't got the guts." I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. "Already did it. Just need your signature." Harold leaned down, his face inches from mine. "You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird. You can't even take out the trash." "I'm done talking, Harold." I met his stare without blinking. "Sign the papers, or I'll have a lawyer make you." He scoffed, grabbed the pen with a tight grip, and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy, like he was carving it into the paper. Then, he threw the pen down like it burned him. "Good luck, darling," he sneered. "You'll be crawling back before the month's up." But I wouldn't. I couldn't. This was my line in the sand. The bin that had finally overflowed, spilling out all the lies, all the pain. Despite everything, I smiled. Because that paper in front of me? It felt like the first step toward a new life. "Crawling's not my style," I said quietly. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Too quiet. Too calm. It felt strange, like the air was holding its breath. Inside, I felt like something was about to explode. Then Harold spoke over a cup of coffee. "We need to get the property split locked down," he said. Like it was just business. "Got a lawyer already. Some hotshot in the city near Siren." He took a sip, then looked at me. "You're coming with me?" It wasn't a question. With my legs still useless in a cast, I didn't have much of a choice. So, I just nodded. He helped me into the car, propped in my cast, and off we went. Everything seemed fine. Normal even. Until it wasn't. We were speeding down the highway, the city in the distance looking like a bunch of tiny toy buildings. Then, out of nowhere, Harold pulled over. "Says the wheel needs air," he mumbled. Then he stepped out of the car. And that's when everything changed. "I just want to make sure we're safe," Harold said. Something about his voice felt off. But I got out anyway, leaning on the car for support, feeling as fragile as the cast on my leg. He messed around near the tires for a minute. Then, without warning, he jumped back into the car and hit the gas. He took off. So fast, I barely had time to yell. And just like that, I was stranded, standing there in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the sound of his car disappearing down the highway. Was this really happening? I didn't have to think. My phone was in my hand, and I was already hitting record when I called him. He picked up, sounding smug. I've never hated the sound of a voice more. "Come back!" I yelled. "This isn't funny." But he laughed. Actually laughed. Then he said something about me getting what I deserved for wanting a divorce. Can you believe that? The line went dead, and just like that, the reality of what had happened hit me like a brick wall. I stood there, watching his taillights shrink into nothing. I was alone, miles away from anything. The cold seeped through my jacket, but the real chill wasn't the weather, it was the truth sinking in. I was truly on my own. Cars sped past, one after another, like blurs in a bad dream. None of them stopped. Why would they? To them, I was just some random woman on crutches standing on the side of the road. Not their problem. Not their mess. The minutes dragged on. The cold bit through my clothes. I was starting to lose feeling in my fingers when a Jeep rattled to a stop beside me. I turned, and my jaw nearly dropped. Randy. My old boss. Of all the people to find me here. I climbed into the Jeep, and as soon as the heater kicked in, I felt warmth creeping back into my cheeks and hands. Randy glanced over, his face serious, his brows furrowed with concern. "You look like hell, Hannah. You know that?" His voice was rough but not unkind. "Why the hell didn't you call someone?" I shrugged, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Thought I could handle it," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. Randy let out a sharp breath. "He left you on the side of the road? With a broken leg?" His voice rose, full of disbelief and anger. "That Harold is a damn coward." I nodded, hugging myself tighter as the truth of his words settled deep in my bones. I thought about the freezing wind, the pain in my leg. "Yeah," I said. "I guess he is." Randy didn't reply, just gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. When we reached Siren, Randy practically carried me up to the 5th floor. The sounds of the office filled the air, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, quiet chatter. It was jarring but also comforting, a reminder of the life I used to have. Inside his office, Randy handed me a mug of coffee. I held it tight between my hands, soaking in the warmth. The smell alone was a promise of better things. "Thanks, Randy," I said, taking a careful sip. The coffee was strong just the way I liked it, a sharp contrast to the cold I had just come from. Randy grunted, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Can't believe that bastard. After everything, let's not talk about him." I cut in, not wanting to go down that road. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that only comes from years of working together, of understanding each other's moods without needing words. Randy finally stopped pacing and turned to face me. "So, what are you going to do now, Hannah?" His voice was serious. All playfulness gone. I exhaled. "I don't know. I really didn't know." Randy's gaze softened. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. "Look," he said, "I won't beat around the bush. We need you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left." Something stirred in my chest. Hope, maybe, or just shock. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," he said without missing a beat. "You were one of the best. Hell, you are the best. I should have fought harder to keep you." I let out a small, shaky smile. The offer warmed me, but it also overwhelmed me. "It won't be easy with my leg like this," I said, glancing down at the cast. "We'll manage," Randy said without hesitation. "I'll wait until you're back on your feet." Literally. Then he leaned forward, that determined glint in his eyes. "I'm not taking no for an answer." His voice was steady, sure, the kind of confidence I hadn't felt in a long time. It felt like a lifeline. "I'll think about it," I said, even though deep down, I already knew my answer. "I'll think about it," I repeated, a small smile creeping onto my lips. Randy grunted. The sound meant he understood and maybe, just maybe, he was a little impatient for me to say yes. A purpose, a place to be, someone who believed in me. After everything that had happened today, this was more than I could have hoped for. Maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, Harold was on his way to his meeting. The tension in the air was thick as he marched toward the boss's office, his boots heavier than usual, his steps more hesitant, like he could sense the storm waiting for him. The door creaked open as he stepped inside. This used to be his kingdom. But today, it felt different. I stood by the desk, arms crossed, waiting. "Harold, come in." "Shut the door behind you," the boss said, his voice calm but firm. Harold stepped in, saw me, and went pale. But, he quickly pulled himself together. "What's this about?" he grumbled, like a cornered animal ready to fight. The boss gestured to the chair, but Harold didn't sit. Instead, he crossed his arms, mirroring my stance. But where I stood with determination, he stood with defiance. "Harold," the boss started, fixing him with a stare that could freeze fire. "I always thought you were a smart man. But what you did, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen." Harold glanced at me, his eyes flashing between fear and anger. "So, she's been running her mouth. What lies has she been spreading?" I didn't flinch. "No lies needed," I said, my voice steady. "I just played him the greatest hits of your ugly little symphony." The boss reached into his desk, pulled out a recording device, and slid it across the table. "Care to listen?" he asked. "For old time's sake?" Harold's face turned gray as concrete. "You can't do this," he stammered. "You can't fire me over." "Over what?" The boss cut in, his voice sharp as steel. "Over you terrorizing your wife. My employee?" "Oh, I can. And I am." Harold's eyes darted between us, looking for some crack in the armor, some weakness. There wasn't one. "I'll take you to court," he spat. I laughed, cold and sharp. "That's funny," I said, "because that's exactly where we're headed. Only difference? I've got evidence. And you've got nothing but lies and empty threats." The boss stood up. His chair screeched against the floor like a war drum. "Get out of my office," he said, "and get out of our lives. You're finished." And just like that, Harold's fate was sealed. In court, the evidence spoke louder than his anger. The judge didn't hesitate. Then, the gavel hit the desk like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. "You are ordered to pay compensation," the judge said. "And this court grants the separation." The words felt like the first breath of spring. Cold, but full of promise. Back at work, I fell right back into my old rhythm. Only this time, something was different. Everything felt new. Like I was finally free. I wasn't just doing my job. I was rebuilding. Every keystroke was a brick. Every good morning was mortar. Every finished project was a pillar in the new life I was building. "Hannah," my co-worker Wayne said, snapping me out of my thoughts. "Must feel weird, getting everything back." I turned to my chair to face him. "Weird doesn't even begin to cover it, Wayne," I said. "Feels like I just came back from the dead." Wayne chuckled, his laugh deep and rough. like an old pickup truck starting up. Zombie Hannah, back for revenge. I cracked a smile. Something like that. Only this time, I'm not taking crap from anyone. No more, Mrs. Nice Gal. That's the spirit, he said. You know we've got your back. No matter what. I nodded, feeling the warmth around me. And, it wasn't just the heating. It was them. The people here. The support, the sense of belonging. It felt like home. A place where I was safe, where no storm could shake me again.